What the hell? How'd my rifle get on the sofa? Is it smoking a cigarette?
All I wish is for you to sit and talk with me.
No, I think I'll stand.
Silence! Or stand. As you wish. It is enough that we are alone together. Just the two of us.
Honey, I think my rifle's possessed. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pews and Brews, where we have a couple beers and talk about some gun gear. I'm Not So Tactical Tim, and today we're going to be talking about the Evil Black Rifle. Now, that term's been around for quite a while, but you might have noticed it's gotten a little more traction recently. So, what's the best way not to have an evil black rifle? Change the color. Heck, you can make it something super pretty, like this one here. That's not evil at all. In fact, it's kind of cute. Now, this particular firearm I did with Cerakote. The coating that I'm going to show you today is a product called Norrell's Moly Resin. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not have. This is probably the best, most user-friendly product on the market for somebody that wants a high-quality coating on their firearm without getting into some of the complexity involved with the two-part coatings like Cerakote. It's a phenolic resin, which means when it cures, it gets to like a pool ball hardness. The phenolic resin is pretty much what billiard balls are made out of, and if you played any pool, you know they're really tough to scratch and they're really tough to chip. The other great thing about this that makes it so user-friendly is the catalyst is already built into it. It's activated once you bake it at 300 degrees for an hour. The big benefit to that over the Cerakote, the two-part process, is when you add the catalyst into the Cerakote, you have a couple hour window to use it, and any product that you don't use just gets pitched. With the Moly resin, anything that's left in your spray gun when you're done, you just pour it right back into the bottle, seal it up, save it for the next project. The other thing that makes it probably the most user-friendly of all is Moly Resin suggests that you use nothing but an external mix airbrush to do this. You don't need an automotive detail gun, a big compressor, any of that kind of stuff. You just need a cheap, now I got a Pash external mix airbrush. I'll show you that in a little more detail later on. For like 50 bucks, that's all you need. They make little airbrush compressors. They make little cans of propellant you can use for them, so you don't need to have a big compressor. I will say the propellant cans don't last very long, so you know, if it's something you decide you want to do on a more regular basis, it'd probably be a good idea to either get one of the little airbrush compressors, or if you have a compressor at home, you can get an adapter for the airbrush hose just to hook into your regular compressor. So it saves you a lot of money on wasted product, a lot of money on equipment, and the ease of use with, you know, just spraying it on with an airbrush it's just so much more user-friendly than Cerakote. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say it's necessarily better, but I'll tell you what, as far as thinness of coating and durability, if it's not as good as, it's just a hair below. So we're going to take this and try it out on this magazine here. I was going to do a full gun, but now I have a vent hood downstairs, but when you're doing a full set, it's a lot of spraying, it's a lot of moving pieces back and forth, and it just really wasn't working out real good for the video. So what I did was I went ahead and I'm going to do a stars and stripe theme on this. So I coated this white and baked it. You can put the uncured Moly resin over top of cured Moly resin. So I baked this. We have our little star stencils on there, and this is my line for what's going to be blue and what's going to be red. the blue and red is against the white is really going to show up good so that you can really see, you know, how much to put on each pass. The Moly resin you do in 4, 5, 6 real light passes, just depending on how much depth of color you want. You stick it in the oven at 300 degrees for an hour, cures to a pool ball hardness, and that's it. You're done. Once it cools down, you're ready to go. There's no waiting a week or 2 weeks for, you know, some of the air dry products. A lot of people I've heard say, oh, they're not really hard for a couple of weeks, and even then they're iffy. The other thing we're going to do, if you wait till the end of the video, is we're going to try something out with this magazine that I've been wanting to try, and I figure since I'm doing this for the video, I'm going to give it a shot. If it works out, I think it's going to be pretty cool, so stick around at the end of the video and we'll see if it works. But for now, let's head down to the not so tactical dungeon and see if we can exorcise the demons out of some of these evil black rifles. Stick around. Alright, here we are in the not so tactical Dungeon of Doom, and we have our magazine that we're going to coat. Now the color we're going to use first is going to be the American flag blue. I'm going to do that on the top. We're going to put a little paper skirt around the bottom here just to kind of wall off the bottom section where the red's going to go. This magazine was wiped down with acetone because of handling it earlier in the video. The Moly resins, once it's cured, is pretty much impervious to any solvent. They actually have a running $25 reward for anybody that can find any solvents that'll remove it once it's cured. The other nice thing about being able to cure it is when you're doing the design, if you mess something up, get some overspray, something like that you want to remove, you can just remove it with acetone before it's cured. So by baking the base coat, if you do mess up and you have to remove something, you're not messing up the base coat. You don't have to redo that. So that's why typically I'll cure the base coat and then we'll do these 2 steps back to back and cure the whole thing at once. The airbrush that I got, this is the Pash external mix. It all goes up through this needle here and is just drawn up by the suction pressure coming out of the tip. I have this set at about between 25 and 30 psi. That seems to work out pretty good with the medium tip. This is also what they call the S series. You see there's a nut right here, and the bottle actually screws on to the airbrush. So by turning that nut, you can remove the bottle. Most of these type of airbrushes are just a press fit. I opted to go this way because I use the larger 3-ounce bottles, and it gives me a little more security that, you know, if I bump it or the bottle should loosen up, it's not going to fall off halfway through a project. So you just tighten that down and you're ready to go. We're going to fill this up with some of the coating and shoot some coating on this. I'll probably mute down where I'm spraying a little bit because I did another video spraying with the airbrush, and for whatever reason the camera really picks up that sound of the airbrush spraying, so I'll mute that down a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is take this part and we're going to hang it in a 150 degree oven. The reason for doing that is when you warm these up, spraying the coating on a hot surface or warm surface gives you the flattest sheen possible. You want the solvents to evaporate out almost immediately when it hits. And by having the part warm, it allows it to do that. So we'll, after each coat, spray. I'll stick it in the oven for just a couple minutes. The metal on the magazine is real thin, so it'll get back up to temperature really quick. We'll pull it out and shoot it. I'll probably speed up the process in between a little bit because they're all the same steps. But for the first one, we'll show you how light of a coat you really need to go each time. And then you just build up those coats in 3, 4, 5 layers. And then once you're done, stick it in the oven, bake it at 300 degrees, pull it out, let it cool, and it's ready to go. So let's get ready to throw some coating on this. Alright, we taped off the bottom of the magazine to protect that. Got some gloves on. I did put on a long sleeve shirt. You can hear we have the vent hood running and we have our safety glasses on. We have our glue in our jar. You can see there's not very much in there. We're not going to need very much of this for this small a piece. Now what I like to do is start with the needle all the way closed, and then I just have a old piece of cardboard back here and just hit your air while slowly opening the needle until you just start to see some product come out. Then you're going to back the needle down, and you want it to, from about 8 inches away, you want it to just barely miss the surface, just like that. So now that we have that set, what I'm going to do is take this magazine and stick it in my oven at 150 degrees just to warm it up, because the warmer you get it, the flatter the sheen is going to be. The cooler you spray it, the glossier it's going to be. So we're just going to warm it up for a second. I'm going to pull it out, and then we're going to shoot it. Okay, our piece is warm. We're ready to shoot. Now every time before I start spraying, I'm just going to give it a little pass just to make sure my nozzle's still clear and I still have the amount that I want. Nothing got bumped in between. Because once you start spraying, you don't want to find out that you either have no product or way too much. So just give it a quick pass just to double check it. And then all you want to do, just like painting anything, nice, slow, even motions. And you can see I'm barely putting anything on it. It's barely covering the white. That's what you want. You don't want it to go on heavy and wet like you're doing a spray bomb. You want it to dry within seconds of hitting the part. So that's our first pass, and like I said, it's just literally a dusting on there. And that's the kind of coverage that you want for your first pass. As you start to build up coats, you can go a little bit slower and get it a little bit heavier, but I would advise doing 4 or 5 real light passes like that, rather than trying to get it done quick by doing 2 or 3 and end up having kind of a blotchy sheen to it. By doing it light on a warm piece, you get the flattest, most even sheen to your finished product. So it'll go back in the oven for a couple minutes just to warm the part back up, and I'll speed up the rest of this while I'm spraying it, but you'll be able to see how light it's going on each pass, and then we'll get to the second half of the magazine. Okay, and that looks pretty good for about the depth of color that I want on this. When you're spraying it, especially over white, when you get to the pass where you can see that it's not really getting any darker, then you know you've reached pretty much full depth of color, and there really isn't any reason to put more layers on. You're not going to make it really any more durable, and all you're going to be doing is just overcoating the part and wasting product at that point. So now we have the color where we want it. I'm going to just put it in the oven for a little bit longer than I was when I was spraying it to let it completely flash off. Then we'll pull the tape and start on the bottom half. We're ready to lay down the red now. One thing I didn't mention when I did the blue is a good idea is to have one of these. This is just a piece of a tack cloth. You can pick them up usually in auto parts stores where they have their auto painting supplies. It's just mildly sticky and it leaves no residue at all. And it's a good idea just to go over the surface, because this coating goes on so thin that any little pieces of dust, a hair, anything like that is going to really show up. So you just want to take a tack cloth, or if you have a compressor, or even a can of that compressed air like to clean your computers, and blow it off real good, anything like that. But right before you start, you want to make sure that it's completely dust free. As you can see, I've added the stripes that we're going to use for the Stars and Stripes pattern. Now we're just going to go through the exact same procedure that we did. I'm going to stick this in the oven for a second while I get my spray pattern on my gun set up, and then we'll throw some red on it. Okay, I think that's a good depth of color on that. I didn't really see it making it any darker as I was continuing to spray. So another thing that I want to mention to you, the magazines I'm using, they do have some lettering on them. They're the OK magazines. The magazines actually have, and I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, if this doesn't show up, I'll try to get you a better image of it. Actually have a serial number and a date of manufacture on every magazine. And just to give you an idea how thin that coating goes on, you can read that date of manufacture and serial number perfectly. It's still crisp and clean, so that just gives you an idea how thin this really goes on. So now I'm not worried, because this is just a magazine. It's going to get scraped in and out of the gun, it's going to get dropped. So I'm not worried about this being perfect, but this is just a good example to use to show you how easy it is to do this, even with a semi-complex design. This whole process only took me about 15 minutes. Now we're going to stick this in the oven, let it flash off really good, and pull the tape, the stencil, and then we'll bake it at the 300 degrees for an hour, and I'll show you the finished product then. Okay. Been cooking for an hour, so now I'm just going to use this little Leatherman tool, because that wire that's holding it's at 300 degrees in the oven. We're going to pull it out and see what it looks like. And there you go. That's our magazine. I did this in the kind of tattered American flag pattern. You might notice that the colors look just slightly darker than they did originally. They will darken up just a hair when they're baked. So if you get a certain color and it looks a little bit, a little bit light, don't worry too much. Like I said, I didn't get super carried away with this because it's just a magazine. So that's the final product. I think it looks pretty good. Now, they do cool off quick, even though this was just in a 300-degree oven. I can already touch it. Now that it's been baked, it's pretty much impervious to anything. Once it cools down enough to touch it like that, it's ready to go. It's as durable as it's ever going to be. And now I know you can't actually see this, but when you rub your hands across this coating is so thin that you actually can't feel the transition between these stripes at all. Even in these areas where it overlapped the hair, you can't even feel the transition point. That's how thin this coating goes on. The other way to tell is, I'm going to try to get as good a video of this as I can. I don't know if you can see it real well, but if you look at right here, and particularly down here, these magazines have a date of manufacture and a serial number on them. they are still completely readable. You can see here, OK Industries, New Britain, Connecticut. That's how thin it goes on. So, like I said, it's a magazine. I wasn't looking for it to be absolutely perfect. There's a couple little spots here that I could have touched up from where I had it taped when the product wasn't cured yet. But it's going to be going in and out of a gun. It's going to get, like anything, this coating, like any coating, it's not forever. If you get it banged around, sliding in and out of a gun, just like anodizing or anything else, it's eventually going to wear. So for the magazine, I really wasn't worried about being, my best work ever. The other reason I really wasn't worried about it being my best work ever is because now I'm going to try something on this that's either going to turn out really cool or it's going to completely ruin the magazine anyway. Hopefully it turns out the way I want it to, but stick around and we'll find out, because it's the first time I'm going to try it, and we'll see if it works. The one last thing I wanted to show was the oven that I kept referring to when I was moving the pieces back and forth and that we were going to bake in. As you can see, it's not actually an oven, it's just an electric smoker. Now, the one really nice thing about these is they just run off a standard 110 house power, so most actual ovens run off of 220 if they're electric. And the gas ovens, I'm not so much worried about the fumes igniting while the parts are curing, but this just works out really good. If you take a look on the inside, you can see there's a lot of space in there, and it has these removable racks. So I just have the one rack on the top that allows me to hang the pieces from the top rack there, and you have a ton of room in there. This is a 30-inch electric smoker, plenty of room in there to hang stuff. Now I do have the water and the drip pan in the bottom, not because obviously I don't use them for anything, but it kind of helps disperse the heat, because the only element is the electric element all the way on the bottom. That way, if I have a piece that's a little bit longer, it's not really getting a direct blast of heat every time that element kicks on. The only word of caution I will give you is these dial indicators for the temperature on the front tend to be very inaccurate. And you got to make sure that this is at 300 degrees, or I run mine at 310 just to make sure it's at least 300 all the way throughout the smoker. But I would advise getting something thermometer-wise a little more accurate than the original dial thermometers that are on the front. But that's the last piece of equipment. Now let's go finish up this video. Well, believe it or not, this is our really cool red, white, and blue magazine. You might see that it's just all black now. Well, there's a reason for that. I said at the beginning of the video, if you stuck around, I was going to show you something that might turn out pretty cool. It was the first time I was going to try it, and this is it. You're thinking, well, what's so cool about just, taking a perfectly neat magazine and painting it black again? Watch this. Regular heat gun. Pretty cool, huh? Now, what I did to achieve this effect is something I've been wanting to try. I had seen it and read about it a little bit, but I wasn't sure if it was going to work the way I wanted to do it. What I did was I bought a photochromatic powdered pigment. They make them in all sorts of different color change types. The one that I bought was black to clear. Now, you see the colors are a little more muted. Part of the reason for that is because I took that pigment and I mixed it with clear satin Moly resin. Mixed it up, sprayed it on just like we did with the entire magazine, baked it in the oven for an hour at 300 degrees, and to my surprise, not only does it work really good, it held up to being baked at 300 degrees, and it came out really nice even with the solvents and everything that are in the Moly resin. So none of that affected how well it works. As you can see, it's changing back to black. This particular one that I got changes color at anything above about 88 or 90 degrees. So my thought was to maybe do a hand guard or something like that, or a receiver, and as you're shooting, the hand guard and the receiver is going to heat up, and it would change to clear to reveal whatever graphic you had applied underneath it. I thought, well, I was doing this video for this magazine. The magazine had a lot of colors in it with the red, the white, the blue. So I thought, well, that should be a pretty good test to see if A, it's going to work, and B, if it's going to hold up to being baked. And sure enough, it works. I'm actually kind of surprised that it works as well as it does, but hey, maybe we'll give it a shot on something else next. So we're going to go upstairs, probably grab a beer, and wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed it. That's just cool. I got to see that again. Yep, definitely going to use that on something else. As you see, we survived the exorcism of that evil black rifle. Not only that, we're out here at the Not So Tactical Tavern. We had a pretty drastic change in temperatures the last few days, and it's now 68 degrees and sunny out. Whereas 5 days ago it was 27 degrees and about 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. So, I figured I'd take this opportunity to grab that beer we were talking about, first things first, and wrap up this video. So, hopefully you enjoyed the video and you learned a little something about the Moly resin. If you remember in the beginning, I said I wanted to do a full gun, but it was just too many pieces, too much moving stuff back and forth, so I trimmed it down to just show in the magazine. But I did want to show you the full firearm. And this is it. We did this with exactly the same procedure that you saw in that magazine. The only difference is I added a little bit of shadowing to it just to give it a little more depth when you're looking at it, just a personal preference. But everything about this was done exactly the same as we did that magazine. Now, if this is something that you want to try out yourself, just go online and look up either John Norrell or Moly Resin. Go to his site. I haven't really seen it offered by really any third-party distributors, like Brown Owls, Midway, Optics Planet, anything like that. Somebody might have it, but I haven't seen it, so I just go right to his site. It's about 40 bucks a bottle, and that's enough to do between 2 and 3 full-size rifles. So if you go back to one of my earlier videos, which is what really sold me on the Moly resin, I did a 50 Beowulf build, and you'll see that that's done in a burnt bronze. The way I did that one, as compared to what I just showed you, I went out and I got a $10 Harbor Freight airbrush. Not a joke. A $10 Harbor Freight airbrush. I used the heat gun that I was showing to do the color change on the magazine to keep the parts warm in between each coat that I put on, and then I just baked them off in my home oven. When I pulled it out and looked at it, man, the results were perfect. That's what really sold me on the Moly resin as far as being a high quality coating, but just so user-friendly that pretty much any do-it-yourselfer can achieve really great results with a top quality coating at home. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not bashing Cerakote, Duracoat, any of these other coatings. They are fantastic coatings. I just think some people get intimidated by having, the 2-part coatings with having the separate catalyst. You have to get the mix ratios just right. You need a little bit more advanced equipment than what we were using with just the external mix airbrush. And I think, that just kind of intimidates people enough that they just really don't want to try it themselves. The Moly resin eliminates all of that. You get yourself the, a cheap an airbrush as you want. If you have an issue, something comes up, you just can't finish, unscrew the bottle, pour it back in the original container, seal it up, come back the next day and finish it up. There's no time window that you have to use it in like you have with the catalyzed stuff. And now it won't have the durability until it's baked at 300 degrees for an hour, but as long as you don't bump it around, come back in a day or two and finish it up. Now, the magazine that I did sandblast, because the other thing I want to mention is the coating that I did on this, I did right over top of the original anodizing. You can, as long as it's got, you know, some texture to it, you can put it right over anodizing, and it seems to work out really well. The magazines tend to be really, really slick, so that I did sandblast. Then I also soaked it in acetone, as I did with all the pieces for this. You want to give them a really good soak in acetone because they need to be completely oil-free. Preparation's a huge deal with how good your final product is going to be. Anything that's parkerized, anything like that, is also a great base to put Moly resin over. So, for the do-it-yourselfer who wants a top quality coating, man, I just think it's the way to go. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention, if you see my super cool shirt here, this is Mrs. Not So Tactical's organization, Keystone Military Families. I figured since we're doing the patriotic theme with the firearm, I give her a little shout out. It's a fully volunteer nonprofit organization. They help out military families who might be struggling a little bit. They have a food pantry, they do furniture, clothing, you know, so it's just a really great organization to help out military families that might be going through some rough times right now. She's been doing this for 20 years. Anything from sending care packages overseas, Christmas stockings, all that kind of stuff. So just wanted to give this organization a quick shout out for all the good work that they do. So that'll pretty much wrap it up from us. So now, if you're trying to figure out what to do for your next project, maybe take one of those evil black rifles and do what we did and turn it into an upstanding American citizen. From all of us here at the Not So Tactical Tavern, until the next time, get out there and do something useful with yourself and get pewing. Pews or brews? Well, since I can't find any ammo for you, I guess we'll have to stick with the brews. Oh well, worse things have happened. We'll see you next time.